All right, readers, this is my June book haul. So grab a cup and let's talk about it. All right, I haven't been buying any books. I'm still not buying any books. So this is a borrowing book haul. This is a library book haul, essentially. And I'm really excited about this because I've never done this. I mean, I've featured books that I've gotten from the library now and again in my haul videos, but I've never done a complete library haul video. And this one is just delighting me. So let's get started. Last night, I did not get to go to the Better Off Dead book club at my library, but this was the selection for that. This is a book that our leader of the book club acquires a number of these for us. We check them out. We have a number on the inside, so she knows where this goes back to, but we're able to read these for as long as we need them to finish them and get them back to her so they're not checked out in the traditional way. So I'm going to try to give this a shot in the next couple of days. I have a couple of days off. I have a long weekend. I'm really hoping that I could prioritize this because it's interesting for sure, unique, just like Home by Sarah Gailey, who is the author of The Echo Wife, and Home is Where the Heart Bleeds is a Gothic horror writer, as far as I can tell, darkly Gothic thriller who is perfect, it says, for fans of The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. I am one of those fans, so it sounds like a good fit. Come home, Vera's mother tells her, and Vera does indeed go home to discover that something weird is happening in her mother's house. There's an artist there that she's not familiar with. He seems to be taking over her mother's life. There was a serial killer connected to this house some way. I think that Vera knew that before this occurred, but she didn't necessarily want to go back, but she went back for her mom. But somebody is leaving notes around the house in her father's handwriting, and she has thought that it's the artist, but he swears it's not him. Yes, I would like to get to this, obviously, not terribly long. It's a shorter sized hardback. I feel like I could digest it in a day. Speaking of digestion, my friend Richard at the library, who's a great librarian and makes great recommendations, has recommended this to me, and I have not been able to prioritize it. I've renewed it once already. I may have to renew it again very soon, but this is the Pot Liquor Papers, A Food History of the Modern South by John T. Edge. And this really is about the evolution of food created by recipes that were handed down by the enslaved people and that we still eat today. And what is the pot liquor papers? What does this mean? There's a history behind this. So it does sort of traverse the centuries of Southern cooking and the access that people had to different kinds of food in the South, and sometimes ways in which they use this food creatively that we're still using today. It even, I think, talks about Colonel Sanders and then Kentucky Fried Chicken, because there's a photo of him in here. And there's photos of some other chefs and some other people who are famous that you've kind of heard of. One of them I used to watch all the time. He was on television. What was his name? Large guy, very famous cook. He talks about Julia Child. He talks about Justin Wilson. That's who it was. We used to watch Justin Wilson cook Southern stuff all the time. Anyway, this seems like a great nonfiction read, not also terribly long. Seems like it would be fast, but have I gotten to it? Not yet. It's still on my haul pile, though. I'm not taking it back yet. I'm going to give it a serious shot. All right, let's talk about Hoopla, which is the same library from which I acquired these physical books. Hoopla is an app that I do enjoy. The reasons I love Hoopla is because you can borrow your books, ebooks, or audiobooks for 3 weeks rather than just 2. They do have sometimes a more unique selection. So in other words, they don't always go sort of to the mainstream bestsellers, but they do often have those as well. They are sometimes, though, hard to get your hands on because I think that the library's ability to have a number of copies is restricted in some ways by their budget, but it is usually something that I can put on hold and make available to me when I'm ready. So that makes me happy. The challenge I have with Hoopla is that I cannot borrow an ebook and transfer it to my Kindle. So if I borrow an ebook, which I've often done, I have to read it in the Hoopla app, and it's not my favorite app at all, but it is what it is. I don't think, and somebody you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think one of the reasons I guess that I struggle with it is because my Kindle, I can make a black background with white font, but I'm not sure I can do that with Hoopla. And I prefer a black background with a white font just because it's different for my eyes, and especially because I often read a lot of ebooks as I'm going to bed. And so it doesn't have the same sort of illumination that comes from my device that others would. But also because I can't use the Kindle, I have to use my iPad, which is bigger and just a little bit bulkier. But I can still survive Hoopla because I love it so much. So let's talk about what I borrowed from Hoopla in the month of June and hauled, essentially. So one of them is the Lincoln Highway on audio, which I talked about in my reading wrap up. I'm still in the process of that. I don't have a lot of days left on that audio borrow, so I may end up having to finish that physically or maybe borrow it again. We'll just see. But I do love that audiobook because it is a cast reading rather than one particular narrator, which I did mention in that video too. So that's not news to you. But the Lincoln Highway summer setting road trip book, a number of characters, I guess what I would call it's historic in the sense of when it is set. It's a cast of character story. It's really a lot of character development, and most of these men have been in prison, are not the highest caliber of ethical morality, but they are trying to, each of them have a mission, so to speak, on this road trip, and I'm really enjoying it. All right. And then not long ago, I all of a sudden went back to a May anticipated read because I saw it on the list of things that were available and borrowed on audio The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. Again, I borrowed it on audio and now I've had it for a while and haven't gotten to it. So it will be expiring soon. So I now have gotten the ebook of The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton in case the audiobook isn't renewable for me. Somebody else might be waiting for it. But Stuart Turton wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Is that her name? I think so. Did I do that right? Maybe my brain functioning is coming back from this infection I've had. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, this one is again kind of an apocalyptic setting, which I really love those. I really, really do. This one's tagline is Solve the Murder, Save the World. So it's about an island. 122 people live on the island. They are essentially the kind of the last scientists and people on the earth, and they are growing things and creating a colony of folks, and everything's been going really, really well until one of the scientists is found stabbed to death. Because it's an isolated, closed circle island mystery, one of them is likely responsible for that. Are they all going to go one by one now? I don't know. I don't need to know. It just feels like a good book to me. I love that trope so very much. So that one I have hauled both in physical and in ebook format. And then let's talk about Miss Morgan's Book Brigade. This one was recommended by a podcast, probably currently reading podcast, if I had to guess. And I had not thought about this book until I heard about it. So this one is by Janet Skelzian Charles. I should have looked up how to pronounce that, but I think it's Skelzian Charles. I have this one until the middle of July. It's dual timeline. So 1918, Jesse Carson takes a leave of absence from the New York Public Library to go to France to support the people in France who are being bombed and injured and in this thick of the fighting and the wartime. She wants to help to rebuild those French communities, and in doing so, she's also looking at the well-being of the children in those French communities, and she notices that they don't have books, and so she decides to create a way to press books into their hands on bookmobiles that are created from ambulances so that the children will have something that will bring them into a place of escape and into a space of learning and comfort and just sharing information and books. what a better plot could be, I don't know. But then she disappears. No one knows what happens to her. And then in 1987, Wendy Peterson, who is also a New York public librarian, finds some references to Jessie Carson and really wants to know what happened to her. And so she starts to take a look and research into this. And she discovers that somehow their paths have a connection. Maybe it's that connection that they both were librarians. I don't know, but it sounds great. It's again in ebook format. It's not long, 336 pages. Miss Morgan's Book Brigade by Janet Skelzian Charles. Miss Morgan's Book Brigade sounds fantastic to me. Unexpected because I had not put this on my summer reading list, but it might get there. It might definitely get there. In June, I downloaded A Most Agreeable Murder on ebook as well by Julia Seals. I think I talked about this, but I didn't get to it. So I downloaded it. I had it for the 2 weeks. I started it. I just couldn't get into it. Again, June was a slumpy month for me. So I returned it at the end of June, but I would like to get back to it. I just don't know if that will be in July. But A Most Agreeable Murder is sort of like a Bridgerton-esque feel to it. It has a family, 3 daughters. One of those daughters is not conventionally accepting some of the things that she should be, like maybe quilting or crocheting or who knows what, right? Maybe hosting parties, maybe, presenting herself as a potential wife to some wonderful, well-heeled guy. She is asked to actually present herself and get married by her family to a well-heeled guy, but all she wants to do is solve murder mysteries. And so this one I think is going to be good, and I think she is going to help to solve a murder mystery. And I would love to discover that this ends up as a series. We'll see. But book 1 is on my radar. May get to it again in July. We'll see. But I hauled it in June. Then Kindle Unlimited sent me a recommended book based on the fact that I had downloaded a different book for Amazon First Reads for a month or so ago, 2 months ago, I don't know, something. Those are also free if you're a Prime member. They recommended The Break by Katie Seiss, and I went ahead and downloaded it. And this is a thriller. It is a familiar trope, so I don't have high expectations for The Break, but Katie Seiss has written a book about a new mom, which is kind of something I will not recommend to my daughter at this point because it's creepy and twisty thrillery. But new mom, she's really exhausted, doesn't sleep, and so they hire a part-time babysitter to support her in getting some rest. And something occurs with the part-time babysitter that creates this character whose name is Rowan, creates some unease within Rowan, and she's worried about her baby Lila, and she and her husband Gabe apparently doesn't seem to see anything wrong. It reminds me of a couple of other books I've read recently. The Senator's Wife is one, although that was not about babies. It was about the senator's wife's illness. But there have been some others that are very similar. You can probably think of them, but it was free and it was Kindle Unlimited. And I decided I would see if this is something. And then if it's not, I can just return it right away, right? And then I went to Everand, and I mentioned this in the last video, Ruth Ware, One Perfect Couple, on audio. And this one I have been highly anticipating. It came out last month, and absolutely yes for me. And then another one I hauled, which is a NetGalley proof for me that I haven't finished, but I saw it on audiobook in Everand, and I think it would be a great way for me to maybe finish it more quickly since it's not an ebook format. We'll see, because I have a lot of things I'm listening to, right? But I always like to have a physical, an audio, and an ebook going at one time. And if they're all 3 different genres, that works for me. If they're not, it doesn't. This would work for me, though, because it is definitely nonfiction. And it is on my 12 nonfiction books to read in the month or in the year of 2024. So this is Never Far From Home by Bruce Jackson. Bruce Jackson came from a very poor family in New York City. They were impoverished. Access for him was limited. He had to reach out and find his own kind of wins, right? And so he ends up becoming a Microsoft executive, and he is very, very successful, and things happened in his young life that were very tragic and very violent. And he's telling the story of kind of that experience, as well as how he was able to move forward in the world successfully, but also never far from home, would suggest that he doesn't ever want to forget about his roots in that community because they shaped him. They shaped who he is, right? I did find The Longest Day on ebook on Everand, but Everand, like Hoopla, does not transfer ebooks to that Kindle format for me. So, and that was not your nonfiction pick for me, but I'm going to keep it on my shelf because I might end up reading it that way one day. And then I also hauled Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. I'm not sure about this one, and here's why. I'm not sure, but I think this one made it to the semifinals of the BookTube prize. It was not one that was given to me to read, but it was one that I was really interested in. And so when I saw that it was on Everand on audio, I grabbed it. It's 10 hours and 23 minutes, but sped up, it certainly won't be that. But this one is written by someone who wrote some books that I've never read, but I've wanted to. One is called Shutter Island and one is called Mystic River. So those are both very popular. Dennis Lehane is no slouch in the writing world for sure. And this one is about an Irish family. Revenge, family love, festering hate, and insidious power in Boston. So it's set in 1974 summer. So I felt like this was a good time to read Small Mercies. And it is about the Fennessy family, or Mary Pat anyway, who's lived in the projects, and her daughter stays out late and doesn't come home. That same night, a young Black man goes missing. And so are these things related? How is this going to impact race relations in 1974 and in this little community? But they're saying that those two things are unconnected, but Mary Pat is desperate to find out what happened to her daughter. I have heard really good things about Small Mercies. And again, this was one that I had chosen. You know, when we as judges were asked what books we wanted to go forward at the beginning from a long list of books, this was one that I chose then. And it's one that I have still been thinking about ever since. So it is possible that I will read this sometime this summer, not necessarily in July, but I have hauled it on Everand. So it's sitting in my pretty vast library of titles in Everand. I got to be honest. There's a couple I need to get rid of. Small Mercies, definitely on my radar all this time. I can't really stop thinking about it. So that is it. That is my book haul from the libraries and the systems and apps that I have available to me to be able to choose books to read without paying for them, which has been a delight. I am loving it, loving the backlist, loving the apps, loving the library support. So thanks for watching today. I appreciate you. Let me know what you hauled in the month of June, and let me know if any of those books are the same as the ones that I have hauled in whatever way you hauled them. I definitely want to know. And thanks to all of you who are library supporters and who are cheering me on and who have only been borrowing books from libraries for a while. You really inspired me. I can't wait. Obviously, I have some room on my shelves, but I have books to fill that room. So I am really taking a look at the choices that I've made physically and what choices I'm going to make in the future. So thank you all so very, very much. I appreciate you all. Have a lovely, beautiful, hopefully, summer day wherever you are. And as always, happy reading. Bye.